Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always. I got Dave Kluge here. And Dave, oh man, that was a long NFL draft.
You're telling
Long
me.
NFL draft, buddy.
Long weekend, man. I after our live stream, what was that? Friday night, had about an hour break, and then I had to go on Sirius XM. Didn't go to bed till about 1:30 in the morning. Woke up at 5. Not much sleep this weekend. Lots of writing. I got to the point yesterday. I just had to unplug at like 9 p.m. because I was like, my writing isn't even good right now. Like I'm too tired to even formulate a thought. It was a lot of work this weekend.
Yeah, but you know what? We still have more to do. We have the obligatory Dynasty rookie rankings, and we're going to be doing all kinds of stuff. Like the biggest winners and losers from the NFL draft and Dynasty, and this is all going to convert eventually on over to fantasy and seeing how all of that shakes out. We're going to have some guests on and do a lot of fun stuff this summer. But today we are going to go through our top 36 Dynasty rookie draft rankings with a Superflex twist here. And Dave, you and I have made some changes to our rankings, and I'm very proud of us for being big boys and for looking at the full scope of everything. So let's start this off. First tier, first player, the only player in this tier, Ashton Ginty. He is the 101 for each of us in our rookie rankings. And I'm interested in this because I know we know that Ashton Ginty's really good. We know that he is on a great landing spot for running the football. But we've seen that even the best running backs with high draft capital in their rookie seasons, it's not happening the same way that it used to, the fantasy success for these guys. I was looking back, and the best rookie running backs by season. Last year, Bucky Irving, running back 15. The year before that, Jahmyr Gibbs was running back 8, while Bijan Robinson was running back 12. The year before that, Ken Walker was the running back 19. This is a different scenario. A lot of those guys were splitting time. I think Ashton Ginty is going to be getting a lot of work, and this Raiders offense is going to be totally based around the run. I think there's a shot here where he finishes higher than running back 8 and has a chance to be a top 5 running back.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the guys, you threw some names out there that were round 2 picks and a little bit later in the draft. But when you look at guys who have been drafted top 10 over the last 10 years, Ashton Ginty gets added to a list with Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley. I mean, we're looking at a really short list of guys who were all immediate contributors. Now, the thing I'd push back on a little bit, I don't have Ginty in a tier by himself. My top tier is a little bit bigger, and we can discuss that when we start talking about some of the next players. The reason I wanted Ward ahead of Ginty pre-draft is because we didn't have all of the pieces to the puzzle yet, and there were some potential landmine spots that could have happened early on. If he goes to New York to join Breece Hall in the backfield, we're probably tempering expectations a little bit. If he goes to New England, joins Ramondre Stevenson there, tempering expectations. If he went to Cleveland, where we know it's not going to be a good offense, with tempering expectations. And I think Jacksonville also, Tank Bigsby and ETN would have been a little bit concerned there. I don't think there was a spot in the top 10 that was better than Las Vegas. I mean, we've seen Pete Carroll, whether it's Marshawn Lynch or Chris Carson or Zach Charbonnet, Ken Walker, like when he's got his guy, he is going to ride him, and that is going to be Ashton Ginty. And then the same can be said for Chip Kelly. Look at what he did with LaShawn McCoy, a guy with a very similar archetype to Ashton Ginty. So this, in my opinion, best possible landing spot, got the top 10 draft capital, walks into a room with two coaches that want to establish the run, and no competition for touches. I mean, I'm not worried about Raheem Mostert or Sincere McCormick or Zamir White. He is going to immediately walk in there and command 90+% of the opportunities in this backfield. So I moved him up, but I still do have a tier of 5 players up top. And I think that if you're able to trade back from 101, I've seen some trades where people are getting multiple first round picks to move back a few spots from 101. I still think it's a good
Yeah.
process to take that trade, get the extra draft capital, and still get Cam Ward or Travis Hunter or Tet McMillan or some of these other guys that I have in a similar tier.
Yeah, and like you said, the other guys mentioned all had, like, he's not going into a Tyler Algier being there or a David Montgomery being there. I think we are looking at something that's a little bit closer to a Saquon Barkley rookie season where RB1's not out of the question for him. I don't want to get too over our skis here, but it's not out of the question. And I know we're talking about dynasty rankings, but so much of dynasty hinges on how much success these players have early in their career. And if a player like Ginty can have success in year one, it's likely that he's going to sustain that success, and his dynasty value will obviously just rocket straight up. I know that for fantasy rankings right now, he's being ranked as the RB5. Are you willing to take him there in a fantasy draft ahead of Devon A. Chan, ahead of Jonathan Taylor, ahead of a lot of these other names?
Easily, and I'm probably going to have him a little bit higher. I think for me, it's going to be Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Jameer Gibbs, and then Ashton Jinty there at RB4.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's fair. So ahead of Derrick Henry.
Yep.
All right. I think that's fair. I'm not going to push back on that. Let's go to our next tier. And the reason we have them in tiers is because we've done our consensus rankings where we each bring our ranking to the table here, average it out, and then we kind of found where the separations lie. So in this second tier at number 2, we've got the new Tennessee Titans quarterback Cam Ward. Dave, you've got him as your number 2 overall player. I've got him as my number 4 overall player. I had to do some soul searching here because you and I have talked about how Cam Ward for a while here was the 101 for us because of the Superflex uh, you know label that you have here and the way that the roster is formulated. And then I started to think about it more. And I started to think about some of these other skill players that are also here, where you've got a Travis Hunter, an Amari Hampton, and I started to ask myself, is can those guys be top 12 at their position? I think it's a lot more likely than it is for Cam Ward. I I like Cam Ward, but now that we have landing spots for Travis Hunter and it's not the Browns, and we have a landing spot for Omari and Hampton, and it's not a place where there's going to be a lack of running or a big type of split timeshare going forward, I struggle to put Cam Ward up at 2. I know there's the quarterback value there. My fear is that even if he is good, even if there is that ability for him to, that potential for him to unlock, I worry that the Titans are just not set up to succeed long term. They went and put a bunch of older wide receivers around him. They go and sign Tyler Lockett. They really waited till later in the draft to start to go and get weapons for Cam Ward. The offensive line is okay, not awful, but not great. I haven't seen anything from
I think the
Tennessee.
offensive line is pretty improved. I mean, J.C. Latham is a rookie last year. He's taken a step
That's
forward
why I
this
said it's
year.
okay.
Skaronski has been, developing into one of the best interior
Once again,
offensive
why I said
linemen in
it's
the league.
okay.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit better than okay. I'd put them at
Eh,
a step above okay, whatever that is. Decent.
okay. But the worry for me here is that I don't know that I ever see. By the way, Dan Moore at left tackle worries me. Just gonna throw that out. I don't know that we see Cam Ward make it to top 12 quarterback status, and I think that he's a guy that probably hovers around that quarterback 15 to 24 range for a lot of his career because there's not the big rushing upside. He's not tied to someone that's going to grow and develop with him. That could all change in a year, but we could also end up seeing Brian Callahan getting fired within the year.
I think they might give Callahan a little bit of a longer leash. I mean, they brought him in to draft and develop a quarterback the same way that he did with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. So but I mean, we see the teams do this all the time. Draft a quarterback, doesn't immediately pan out, and they fire the head coach. I'd like to think the Titans have a long term plan here and would maybe give him a little bit longer of a leash, but we'll see how that shakes out. I will say I don't hate the way that the Titans are trying to build here. They're definitely taking a quantity over quality approach when it comes to their pass catchers. They have this weird slew of veterans and rookies, and they brought in some
Van
undrafted guys.
Jefferson,
Yeah, Van
James
Jefferson, and
Prochet,
exactly, yeah. And I mean, they drafted Jackson, and they signed Xavier
Xavier
Restrepo,
Restrepo, baby.
and they brought in
Let's
Shamir
go.
DK in the draft. I mean, they're, like I said, taking a quantity over quality approach. And I don't hate that because then you let Cam Ward go into camp and he's got like 12 guys that he can throw the ball to, and whoever he develops chemistry with is going to move up the depth chart. So I don't hate the approach, but I understand what you're saying. We want to temper expectations. For me, though, since we're talking dynasty, I've talked about it a few times, but I did that study on quarterbacks that are drafted first overall, and Cam Ward's basically got an 85% chance of being a starter for the next 5 years. You look at all the guys drafted over the last 30 years, and it's David Carr, Jamarcus Russell, and one other guy. Oh, Tim Couch are basically like the three busts. All of the other guys that we might even think didn't live up to their number one overall potential, Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff, these guys all went on to have pretty good, prolific NFL careers. And I think that Cam Ward could follow a similar path.
So I like what you said there, where Cam Ward, the likelihood of him having at least a 5-year NFL career window here where he can be productive. And I had to keep that in mind as well, because I look at Travis Hunter, I look at Omari and Hampton, even to an extent, Ted McMillan, and I say, those guys are probably all productive for the next 4 or 5 years as well. And I feel a little more comfortable about their upside. Like I get more excited about that. It's one of those intangible things. I can't put a data point to it. I get more excited about those players. And I think a lot of that also just speaks to how Cam Ward was even treated throughout this draft process. Like the broadcast went away from him after he got drafted, be like, oh, what's going to happen with Travis Hunter now? The Jaguars have traded up. Like it's one of these things. Maybe it's the zeitgeist around the NFL draft and Cam Ward right now that has me less excited about the player. But Travis Hunter was a guy that I thought was special, and the worry was, could he play wide receiver? And it seems like that's what's going to happen in a Liam Cohen offense, where he's tied to a good quarterback, or at least a potentially very good quarterback. And we won't go too long on some of these other guys, but that's why I think I'll put Cam Ward at 4 instead of 2.
And talking about Travis Hunter, I mean, for a guy going second overall, we really don't have much of a sample size there. Calvin Johnson and Charles Rogers, the only guys to go that high in the last 25 years. But when
Yep.
you expand that sample size and start looking at top five guys, I was kind of shocked. I would have thought that like a top five receiver is basically a lock. And there are a lot of great names in that list: Larry Fitzgerald, Andre Johnson, AJ Green. But you've
Jamar
also got
Chase.
Braylon Edwards and Peter Warwick and Corey Davis and Justin Blackman and some guys that didn't pan
But we
out.
also have
So
to.
the hit rate is kind of around 50% for receivers that are drafted top five. Now, Travis Hunter's great. Don't get me wrong. Like, he could be really good, but we said that about a lot of other guys who were drafted top five wide receivers as well, and they don't always pan out. So I'm not saying that you should fade Travis Hunter. That's not what I'm saying, but I think that Cam Ward is just a safer pick than you're getting from Travis Hunter.
I will say this. I think we have to be able to adjust um, the way we look at these players in draft capital, kind of like how we used to say that running backs drafted after a certain time lacked value. NFL draft tendencies change, and we used to see running backs almost exclusively getting taken number 1 overall. It was running back, left tackle, and quarterback, and now that's basically just turned into quarterback or defensive end. And with Travis Hunter, I just don't think that we can treat him the same way that we have other people. And the data points don't quite work for him. He's a different player. And it's also kind of going against my argument here, because he's a different player because he's going to be playing defense, or
Right.
at least there's going to be that attempt, right? I kind of look at it this way. Travis Hunter, the skill set reminded me a lot of Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, a lot of other very good wide receivers, right? And my question with this was going to be is, man, can he be a top 12 wide receiver if he's the second wide receiver on his team every single year, year in and year out, with Brian Thomas there? And then that just led me to the next question, is like, what if he's better than Brian Thomas? What if Brian Thomas is the T. Higgins and Travis Hunter is the Jamar Chase, for lack of a better example? And then I just kept asking more and more questions, going down the rabbit hole to the point where I'm like, what am I doing? The guy's probably going to be somewhere around top 12, top 15, at worst, top 20 wide receiver every single year. I don't think I can turn that down early in the draft. And that's what I did recently in a rookie draft, where I was at the 104. Cam Ward fell to me, and I had to choose between Cam Ward or Travis Hunter. This was a super flex roster. However, you put 3 wide receivers in the starting lineup and 3 flex spots. And I wanted to go with the wide receiver here. And that's why I put Travis Hunter ahead of Cam Ward in that scenario. But I also think I'm willing just to do it in Dynasty rookie rankings, Dave.
That's fair. And I prefer. I mean, we're splitting hairs here. I've got
Sure.
Cam Ward
But these are the
ahead of
players that
Travis
everyone wants
Hunter.
us to talk about.
Yeah, and I've got Cam Ward in the same tier as Travis Hunter. I'd prefer
Yeah.
him, just because, like I said, the data says that a quarterback drafted 1 overall is way less likely to bust than a wide receiver drafted second overall, or even if you expand to the top five. That's just what it comes down for me. I mean, Travis Hunter is a unicorn, very great player, but I just prefer quarterbacks, especially in a super flex league here. But again, splitting hairs. I mean, I think any of these top 3 picks, Ginty, Ward, Hunter, you're going to be pretty happy with them.
So at number 4, this is where we have our first, let's call it disagreement. I have Omarion Hampton as the number 2 player. I think he's one of the safer picks in rookie drafts, simply because of the talent level, because of the draft capital, because of the team he's on, because of the quarterback who likes to dump passes off to the running back. There's so many reasons here. Just an offense that doesn't really have true offensive weapons and playmakers outside of Lad McConkey right now. So Omarion Hampton has an opportunity to be the identity for this team. Najee Harris doesn't really worry me. There's one thing that I saw going around, and I want to give it some context, is that Greg Roman, despite being this
Yep.
running offense guy, has never had a backfield that ranks in the top 10. However, there needs to be this context. The quarterbacks for those teams were Lamar Jackson and Colin Kaepernick, guys that were constantly running the ball, constantly taking away touchdown upside. Now, we know that Justin Herbert has some rushing upside, but I don't think it's going to be the same thing here with Omarion Hampton. Those were also guys that were not passing the ball to running backs, and we even saw that last year and in years prior. Justin Herbert is willing to pass the ball to running backs at a much higher rate than either Jackson or Kaepernick. So Omarion Hampton, I really liked the prospect. I still love the landing spot. To me, he's just a very safe pick. And it kind of comes down to, what do you prefer? Do you want to take the safety of Hampton? Do you want to go for the upside of Hunter? Or do you want to go for the, let's call it currency value, dynasty value of a Cam Ward? And I think it just kind of comes down to, what is your flavor of choice here?
Yeah, and even if you do, remove Lamar Jackson from the equation, my fear is just that they always do split touches in these Greg Roman offenses. And you can argue that he's never had a player of Omarion Hampton's caliber, but J.K. Dobbins' rookie season, he was still third on the team in carries. Gus Edwards was getting his, Lamar Jackson was getting his, Mark Ingram was still in the mix, Justice Hill was getting touches. The year before that, it was a split between Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and Mark Ingram. And when you look, they've got Najee Harris there, who is certainly no slouch. And I know people have written Najee Harris off for dead. I think that they were totally okay going into the season with Najee Harris as the lead guy and then working in some other backs. And I think it kind of shocked them when Hampton fell to 22. So I think that Hampton is going to jump ahead of Najee Harris because he's bigger, faster, younger. He's got a lot of things that Najee Harris doesn't right now. But that backfield as a whole, man, they've just got a type. I was looking outside of Kamani Vidal, every single running back on that depth chart right now, over 6 foot tall, over 220 pounds. They even went out and they signed Raheem Sanders, undrafted free agent, another guy over 6 foot 220. They've got Hassan Haskins there as well. They've definitely got a type. So when I see this slew of running backs that are all kind of the same guy, that worries me that we're not just going to see 250 touches going Hampton's way. We're going to see a drive with Hampton. Then we're going to see Najee come in. Then we might see Haskins and maybe Sanders getting some touches here and there. Greg Roman just really likes to have a corral of running backs. Hampton's great. He got the first round draft capital. We love to see that. But I'm taking Ward and Hunter ahead of him.
See, it's funny, the eye of the beholder thing. You talk about how when the guys are the same archetype, you worry that there's going to be the changing of drives. I see the same archetype and I say, you are the handcuff. Because normally when guys are different, that's when they have the specialist roles here, right? And I know that Najee, when he came into the league, was catching passes, but Omarion Hampton is also a good pass catcher. Omarion Hampton, much more explosive than Najee Harris has ever been. So I know they signed him just this past offseason on the 1-year deal, cheap deal, kind of a good insurance policy or someone to have. But I think it's what you said. I think that once Omarion Hampton fell to them, they said, we have to have him. Right. And I love the upside there with Hampton, and I like the very safe floor there. Last guy on this tier is Teteroa McMillan, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, who went 8th overall. And this is a guy that we had each played with in the mocks, where we had put him at 8th, and you start to hear the rumblings that he's going to fall. And I had moved him around. Dave, I know you mentioned that you kept him there. Like, this was the guy that you wanted to keep there. And it just made too much sense for the Carolina Panthers to not to take Tet McMillan, excuse me. And I've got him at 5. You've got him at 4. I think he belongs firmly in this tier. I see him as a guy who is just going to be a perennial top 24 wide receiver every single year. Not in a derogatory way, but just a solid mid wide receiver 2 every single year. Sort of the same way that we see from a Devontae Smith, a T. Higgins of sorts. If he was on a team, I think it's possible he could be a top 12 guy based on target volume. I don't know that we ever get there with him, because we've seen Bryce Young's affinity for throwing to the slot guys and some of these other players that Dave Canales has put around him.
Yeah, I think so much of this hinges on Bryce Young. You
Yeah.
want to see, what he did over the final month of the season. Was that a flash in the pan? Was that fluky when he came back fresh and everybody else was kind of banged up from the season? Or did he finally turn that page and figure it out at the NFL level? I lean towards the latter. I mean, he was playing really, really good football and he wasn't getting great wide receiver play and he was still playing good football. I mean, throwing balls on the money that were turning into interceptions or drop touchdowns. I mean, it was very, very frustrating, and he was still being productive. So, yeah, I mocked it here because it just makes too much sense. This is the one thing that Dave Canales has had every single step in his NFL journey is this big-bodied X receiver that can get vertical. Had it with DK Metcalf, had it with Mike Evans. Now he's got it with Ted McMillan. This pushes the other guys into better positions. I think we'll see Xavier Legette and Adam Thielen probably splitting snaps out of the slot. I think Jalen Coker is going to be the full-time flanker. You look at what he did at Holy Cross, just getting vertical. We're going to see a lot of that. I don't know if he's got the sky high ceiling. Talking about Ted McMillan, I don't know if he's got the sky high ceiling to be a top three or a top five receiver, but I could absolutely see him kind of working in as a back end wide receiver one, a volume based guy. If the offense takes a step forward and some touchdown variance breaks in his direction, we could see some wide receiver one seasons. I've got him ahead of Omarion Hampton just because, again, you know, that's good draft capital and it's a good landing spot and it's a role that we have seen be very bountiful for wide receivers in the past in this offense. So Ted McMillan was a big riser for me. I was hoping he was going to go eighth to Carolina, but I think if he didn't, we could have seen a free fall where he maybe would have fallen to Green Bay or one of these other teams in the 20s. But going to eighth overall, you got to bump him up quite a bit in your rankings after that.
Yeah, I think there's a Drake London kind of ceiling there for Tet McMillan, where
Also went
with
eighth
good
overall.
volume, yeah, but I
But
think
so did
with some
Tavon
good.
Austin and David Terrell and Plexico Burris and some other guys who haven't panned out.
Okay, I mean, yeah, like if we when we start to play that game, like everyone could be really good or really bad. It
Right.
just we just add context to the player. Is the player good? Did they go to a good landing spot? Right, and so yeah, Tet McMillan, there's a good ceiling there. That's why he's got to be firmly in that second tier. Let's go down to the third tier here, where at number 6 we've got Emeka Egbuka, where Dave, I ranked him as my number 7 player. You have him as your number 8 player. And in full transparency, he is tied with our number 7 player on this list, Colston Loveland. So we'll get both of them here on the screen for you. And Emeka Egbuka, Colston Loveland. Dave, you have Loveland at 6. I have Loveland at 9. They both consensus are about like 7.5 for us. So they're 6 and 7 here on our list. Um, why don't we do this? I kind of want to say something on Emeka Egbuka, and let's have you give the pitch for Colston Loveland. Can I do the positive on Egbuka, and then you
Yeah.
can and
I'm
then
not going to
yeah,
say
okay,
anything negative about Ibuka if that's what you're
yeah,
hoping for. Yeah.
no, I mean I'm not hoping for it, but listen, I don't love the landing spot for the rookie season for Emeka Egbuka, but what I do like is
He's
that
this year's Roma Dunze and Jackson Smith the Jigma, right? Like same exact thing. Talented guy falling
yeah,
into a slot with two very good established veterans ahead of him. This is the same thing we've seen for the last 2 years.
the difference is I actually think this spot's a little bit better because Chris
Mhm,
Godwin is coming off of major back-to-back major injuries.
mhm.
I know he signed the contract, but we got these major injuries. Mike Evans, he's going to be 32 at the start of the season. Guys at his size and that age don't last a whole lot longer. There's been talk every single offseason that this is the year he's going to retire. Egbuka could realistically be the team leader in targets as early as next season. He could be second on the team in receptions this season. He's attached to a good quarterback in Baker Mayfield. He's got the talent to be the lead wide receiver for the Bucks for years. And so initially I was just saying, man, this is just such a rough landing spot. And then I started just to think about it more, dig in a little deeper, and say, the targets could actually be there. A lot of things would have to break wrong for Egbuka to have a poor rookie season. Chris Godwin would have to come back full strength, command a lot of targets, and Mike Evans would have to stick around for more and more years for the dynasty value not to match up for Egbuka.
Yeah, and I do like the immediate landing spot, even last year. I mean, look, just big picture at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2024 wide receiver room. Mike Evans picked up an early season quad injury, I believe, quad or hamstring, something with his leg, and he missed a couple of games, never really came back to form when he did return. Chris Godwin, obviously, with the season ending injury. Jalen McMillan was basically a zero to start the year, third round rookie who kind of came on strong towards the end of the season. So, despite having this injured, not so great wide receiver room, they were still top 10 and 11 personnel. Like they were still trotting out 3 wide receiver sets at a very high rate. So I think we're going to see that again this year. The nice thing is Igbuka right now profiles only to play in the slot. Chris Godwin did that early in his career, but now he's got the versatility that he can line up in some different positions. So it's pretty obvious that it's going to be Mike Evans in the X role, Chris Godwin in the flanker role, and then we're going to have Igbuka playing out of the slot where he's going to get peppered with targets. So I see it. And then they've also kind of set themselves up for a life beyond Mike Evans, where then they could move Chris Godwin into the X role. Igbuka stays in the slot, and then Jalen McMillan moves out to flanker. What I'm getting at is for the next 5 years or so, Igbuka is going to be a slot player in a high-powered, pass-heavy offense. So I do like the outlook for him. But for me, I've got both of the tight ends that went inside the top 15, Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren. I've got both of them ahead of Igbuka. And again, I really do want to stick to my player evals from before the draft. But when I start looking after the draft, I'm looking at previous draft capital and the ranges of outcomes for positions drafted in that area. And the hit rate for tight ends that have gone inside the top 15, pretty darn good. We got a handful of misses in here, but Brock Bowers last year, Kyle Pitts a few years ago, TJ Hawkinson before that. Eric Ebron is one of the big misses, of
Some might
course.
say Kyle Pitts is not a hit.
I mean, 1,000-yard season is rookie year.
Relatively,
If we
yes,
get
he's a
that
hit.
from Loveland and Warren, I'm pretty happy about it. And still just 23, 24 years old, whatever he is, 19, I forget his exact age, but he's still young. But after that, Vernon Davis, Kellen Winslow, Jeremy Shockey, Bubba Franks. I mean, it's a pretty darn good hit rate. You got the Eric
You
Ebron
you
standing out as
have
the huge
listed
miss.
so many players drafted from like the 90s today and the early 2000s. I'm impressed on your deep dive. You went way back for basically every single player we're talking about today.
I did. And, I've talked about this throughout the entire offseason. I use draft
Bubba
capital as
Franks.
my guiding light when I'm doing this because I don't want to dig in and say, well, I really like this guy pre draft. I don't care what the NFL said about him. The reality is, I want to look at range of outcomes for positions drafted in similar areas. And tight ends that are drafted in the top 15 typically end up being better more often than not. So I've got Loveland and Warren both ahead of Igbuka. Um, and they're close. I mean, I've got all of these guys. That's a tier for me. It's Loveland, Warren, and Igbuka. That alone is a standalone tier of 3. So I'm not going to sit here and try to say that Igbuka absolutely needs to be behind those guys. That's how I've got it ranked. But inside that tier, if you want to choose your flavors and you need a wide receiver or you think Igbuka is that much better than the other guys, I don't care if that's how you want to draft it. This is just how I have tiered these guys up.
Yeah, so the draft capital thing becomes interesting because I think we can always frame that however we want. Like we can say, like a certain pick, these tight ends are really good, but then there's also like the Dalton Kincaids of it all, right? Where you don't always have the guy that reaches his full potential. Or going back, let me see. Now
Dalton
we do have
Kincaid
a
was
lot of good
25th
ones
though.
here.
He doesn't qualify for the top 15 that I was looking at, and Warren
I
and
know,
Loveland did.
right, I know, but that's why I'm saying it can be arbitrary too, where it's like if 10 picks later, Hayden Hurst was also a first round pick. So that's why I'm saying like the draft capital thing becomes very perspective depending on how you're looking. Is it top 15? Is it round 1? What is it? What I wanted to look at here with Loveland, because I started to think about this more, was Cole Kmet's not going away. Right? Like I know he's not going to be the main receiving tight end, but I don't think he's going away. Dave, how many receptions do you think Cole Kmet probably gets this season or over the next couple seasons? What is he averaging?
20 to 25 receptions would be about my guess.
Okay.
So yeah, I
Okay.
think that Loveland in the short term, and the other thing I want to say about Cole Kmet is the way that they set his contract up. They had a ton of cap space a few years ago, and they front loaded the heck out of his deal. So I think
Right.
everybody sees Cole Kmet and they're like, "Oh, you got this $50 million contract extension. Why did we draft another tight end?" And the reality is, they already paid him the majority of his money, and basically what it is it's a team option each of the next 3 years that they can pick up for $11 million. So he's going to be on the roster this year, but if they want to move on after this year, they can cut Cole Kmet for $3.8 million in dead cap. That is almost nothing. So if Loveland steps up and is just immediately a much better tight end, they can move on from Kmet. But if they choose to keep him around, I think it's pretty obvious that Cole Kmet would kind of be the Brock Wright, if you will, and Colson Loveland is the Sam Laporta, the move tight end, the guy who plays out of the slot, the guy who gets vertical on seam routes. Cole Kmet is a much better blocker, in my opinion, so I think that we do see him move to more of an inline role. The biggest loser, I think, from this entire draft is Cole Kmet, a guy that we were probably toying with as a potential top 12 tight end. And now, in my opinion, I don't even think I'm going to be able to put him inside my top 30 this year.
Was never toying with him as a top 12 tight end. But what I was getting at with the Cole Kmet, Colston Loveland thing is just Loveland has the athleticism, the draft capital, the prospect profile to be a top 6 fantasy tight end, a top 6 dynasty tight end. What worries me is if Cole Kmet remains involved beyond this year, there's not many tight ends that give you top 12 fantasy production whilst another tight end on the roster catches 30 receptions. Last year, it was Travis Kelce who had to catch 97 balls, while Noah Gray caught at least 30 catches, and then Mark Andrews, who needed 11 touchdowns to do it. So if Cole Kmet is in that 30 catch range, I think the ceiling gets a little bit limited for Loveland. And even beyond Cole Kmet, the drafting of Luther Burden starts to get me worried about. Listen, Ben Johnson is a guy that I think we can trust to get the ball around to his different playmakers, but I think the ceiling gets perpetually lower for Loveland with Cole Kmet being on the roster and the drafting of Luther Burden. Now, if Cole Kmet does get cut next year, Dave, like you said, yeah, it's a good investment to have an athletic tight end like this. I start to get worried when we need roster shakeups to happen for a guy to come into a bigger role. So that's why I have him just a few spots lower than you. Like it's not like crazy how much lower I have him.
So like in redraft, I'm not going to be drafting Loveland. I'm sure there's going to be some people out there that are going to steam him up into the top 10, and I'll be out at that price. But when it comes to Dynasty, I try not to look at the situations too much because things can happen and change so quickly. You know, Cole Kmet could be out of the picture after this year. DJ Moore can get traded. Luther Burden could tear his ACL. And then, oh my gosh, all of a sudden, Colson Loveland is number 2 on the targets behind Roma Dunze. Maybe Colson
Well, that
Loveland
was a
is
lot of
better than
things that
Roma
happened.
Dunze.
Jeez.
But that's what I'm saying. The NFL is wild, and these things do happen all the time. So right now, yeah, you look at it and it's like, oh, it's really hard to think how Colson Loveland's going to fit into this offense, and those are short-term concerns. But if he's a good player, drafted 10th overall, he has the opportunity to be the primary weapon on this offense within the next 2 or 3 years. So that's really it. You know, the draft capital, the talent. I'm betting on that long term more than anything else.
Yeah, I don't hate him. I have him at 9. You have him
Yeah,
at 6. I prefer Egbuka and the next guy we're going to talk about here, who you don't like as much. Trevion Henderson. We've got him at 8,
and this one
running back for the New
hurts
England
because he
Patriots.
was like my guy pre-draft. This one hurts to have to move him down a bit.
You've got him at 10. I've got him at 6. He comes out to be our number 8 player in our Dynasty rookie rankings. And for me, um, I see a James Cook archetype role for him. That's not my direct player comp, but you put him on a team that has a mobile quarterback, a gunslinger, very similar to Josh Allen, but the team does not have an outstanding wide receiver room, someone who is going to be the consistent pass catcher for him. And I don't think that sorry to say it, I don't think they added that with Kyle Williams here. I think they added another guy to the group.
Stephon Diggs.
Um,
He's
sure,
old. Short
if at
term.
his age and with his injury it's going to work out, yeah. I mean, it can be, but I think what's most likely is Henderson ends up being, first of all, the passing down guy here because he is the best pass blocker on the team. Ramondre Stevenson was getting outsnapped by Antonio Gibson by the end of last year, and he also had 7 fumbles last year. Like Ramondre Stevenson, I almost called him Ramondre Gibson and just turned them into one guy. But if there was ever an archetype for players that coaches just despise, it's running backs that they did not select who fumbled the ball. Like Ramondre Stevenson feels more, this is going to sound crazy when I say it, feels more likely to be cut from the team in training camp by pissing off Mike Vrabel by having bad practices or fumbling issues than being the starter this season. I'm not saying it's going to happen, just think that's way more likely than actually being the guy in this backfield. Trevion Henderson, he's got the pass catching ability. He's got the explosive play ability that Antonio Gibson doesn't really have anymore. Ramondre Stevenson doesn't have. I'm banking on this guy growing with Drake May and being the outlet guy for Drake May over and over and being the big play merchant that the Patriots need. They simply just don't have weapons on offense. They put this kind of draft capital in a guy. They draft Will Campbell. They've just created this ecosystem for Drake May. And when Trevion Henderson is one of the biggest parts of that ecosystem, perhaps even the most important part of that ecosystem, I'm willing to put that guy a little bit higher in Dynasty rookie rankings.
Yeah, and I love the talent. You know that. I've talked about Travion
Yeah.
Henderson a lot this year, but With Ramondre Stevenson, his contract's pretty ironclad. I mean, it would cost them more money to cut him than it would just to keep him on the roster. So he might be
Okay.
one of those guys that falls to like RB4 on the depth chart or something like that, but they can't really afford to cut him unless they just want to take that money on the chin. But for me, what it is I think Vrabel is going to get a long leash. You know, they just did the 1 year with Gerard Mayo and moved on, but I think that they want to have that infrastructure that they had in the Belichick era, where they just have a long term coach there. I think that Vrabel and Kraft are very aligned on their long term plans for the organization. And when I see Mike Vrabel, you know, he played under Belichick, where Belichick was the one that kind of invented this running back up by committee sort of thing. And Vrabel's first year in Tennessee, he did that at the expense of Derrick Henry. He was giving Deion Lewis 50% of the touches there. It was year two when he realized, wait, Derrick Henry is an alien, the best player on the planet. I need to give him all the workload. But year one, he still tried doing this kind of split committee of a backfield. So when I see Ramondre Stevenson, you know, a very good early down guy. He does have struggles with the long speed and he has fumbling issues. But if he can get the fumbling under control, he could be that early down guy, which does, don't get me wrong, sets Travion Henderson up for a great role where he's the passing down guy in New England. That could be a very, very good role, but he doesn't have that 250 plus touch upside in his season. And that's the thing that concerns me a little bit. I'm not crazy about this landing spot just because of the tendencies that I expect to see from Mike Vrabel.
By the way, Ramondre Stevenson, if he gets traded, zero and dead
Yeah.
cap. Also,
So that
and
would be
the
the out if they
following,
found some. I mean, 5.5 million this year isn't too bad, but it's next year when that 7.6 kicks in. That's bad. And this is another one of those where like people said like, oh my gosh, a $36 million contract. The reality is 17 million guaranteed. They could move on from that after 2 years. There's
yeah.
no way they're paying him out $20 million over 2027 and 2028.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like I keep coming back to this. It's the perspective thing. Like I know you said, Mike Vrabel does the split with Deion Williams and Deion Lewis, excuse me, and Derrick Henry in the first year. But then we also see for year and year and year after that, it's the Derrick Henry show, right? Maybe Trevion Henderson doesn't have that same archetype, but we've also seen an NFL that's changed. I think years past, we would have said there's no way a guy like James Cook keeps getting the volume that he's getting, and it's happening. So I wonder how much of that is Mike Vrabel looking at within the own division and seeing, man, that's what the Bills are able to do. We've got a Josh Allen light quarterback over here in Drake May. Let's give him a similar guy that can help out. And I'm sure there's also a lot of that Ohio State just connection there that he just loved watching Trevin Henderson make big plays. Let's go to the next guy on here. Tyler Warren is the next player on this at number 9, tight end for the Indianapolis Colts. Dave, you've got him at 7. I've got him at 10. Um, I love Tyler Warren, the player. I think he is a one of a kind prospect. I think he has an opportunity to change the tight end position with his skill set. I don't love the landing spot. And for me, my ranking of even keeping him this high at 10 is about draft capital. It's about talent and hoping that when if and when Anthony Richardson gets replaced, or if and when this coaching regime and GM regime gets replaced, the next guys come in and say, we got to build around this special talent that we have here. But that rarely happens with a tight end. So I'm just very apprehensive when it comes to Tyler Warren, despite the fact that I really like the talent. I just don't see him getting creative goal line stuff, even though I want him to. You've got Jonathan Taylor, you've got Anthony Richardson. I've got to hope for a lot of screens and creative plays, the way that Shane Steichen did with Dallas Goedert, and I think it's very possible.
And that is exactly it for me. He took the words out of my mouth. They've needed a tight end in this offense, and they've kind of pigeonholed Michael Pittman into being their tight end. He very much so ran the same routes in that offense that Dallas Goedert ran in Philadelphia. He just couldn't do the inline blocking stuff. Tyler Warren can do that. So, yeah, I see this as like a supercharged Dallas Goedert. I think Tyler Warren is a much better player than Dallas Goedert ever was. So, I think that we know the limitations from Anthony Richardson, right? He's not going to be one of these guys who is picking defenses apart at every level of the field and across the middle of the field. He's going to run and he's going to get the ball to his playmakers and he's going to lean heavily on Jonathan Taylor. So I see really easily right now kind of what this offense is going to look like, whether it's Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones, I should say, because they both, I think, have the same exact limitations. they have two guys who can make big plays after the catch in Tyler Warren and Josh Downs. I think we're going to see him shrink the field here. Like we'll occasionally get those deep shots to Adonai Mitchell and Alec Pierce to keep defenses honest, but I think the majority of the pass attempts in this Indianapolis offense are just going to be near the line of scrimmage. Get the ball to Tyler Warren, get the ball to Josh Downs, and let them do what they do best, which is rip off big plays and exciting plays after the catch.
Final guy in this tier, number 10, Quinshawn Judkins, who it's funny because like once I get into 8, 9, 10, I think that's the sweet spot for me where once I get to 8, I'm just kind of apprehensive about all these guys, but yeah, you got to rank them somewhere. And Quinshawn Judkins, I have him at 8. Dave, you've got him at 11. And Judkins, for me, my player comp for him in the Football Guys Rookie Guide, which, by the way, is getting updated with all of the post-draft fantasy outlooks, and it's no longer going to be free. So if by the time you're watching this, click the link down below, see if it's still free, see if you can get your version 2 from pre-draft, but we're going to be adding more stuff in there. But my player comp was David Montgomery, and I started to look at even a player like David Montgomery, who we all see now is this touchdown merchant on the Lions. In his rookie year of work, it's around the 230 touches. It's not a big passing game role. He's the running back 25. I can see something similar for Quinshawn Judkins here. I think where I get a little bit more worried is that he's not going to have the valuable touches. He's not going to always be the passing down back, despite the fact that he's a much improved pass protector. He's got some decent hands. And Joe Flacco does like to check it down, but I think we end up seeing some Jerome Ford out there. We end up seeing some Dylan Sampson out there who they drafted in the 4th round. Like there are other guys who can be out there, which is why I don't have Judkins as high as a Trevion Henderson. But I still think that he's going to get plenty of touches at a running back position where you're just not seeing that as much anymore. And I'm okay with Judkins being a Brian Robinson, like a perennial RB 25 every single year with, I think, maybe some more upside. The worry is that the Browns are just going to be starting over again next year with a rookie quarterback, and it could be 2 to 3 years before Judkins and the Browns offense really reaches any type of potential. And by that point,
Yeah,
how much Judkins do you have left?
that's exactly my fear. Yeah, is that it might take, well, not might, it's probably going to take a few years to get this Browns team back on track. And by then, who knows what we're looking at from Judkins. And he talked about it. I mean, he said basically everything I wanted to say. They've got Jerome Ford, they've got Dylan Sampson, they've got Pierre Strong, they've got these guys that are the big play speedy guys. And my fear now is that we're going to see Judkins not in a 3-down role. We're going to see him in the same role that he had at Ohio State, where he's taking the early downs, and then where Travion Henderson would come in for the big plays and the high value touches. Now those are going to go to the aforementioned guys that we just talked about. So my fear with Quinshawn Judkins is that we're looking at an early down guy on a bad offense that isn't going to have a lot of scoring opportunities, and the volume could be there. I mean, we could see 280 touches, but if that's going for 900 yards and 3 touchdowns, it's not all that valuable in fantasy football. So I was happy that he got the early round 2 draft capital. Not crazy about the landing spot, and then not crazy about them using a 4th rounder on Dylan Sampson after.
Yeah, it's weird. But I mean, the Browns didn't do a lot that made sense this week. They draft Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, and they go out and get Shador Sanders in the 5th round, and nobody looked happy to draft Shador Sanders in the 5th round. Wow, that was the first
The
mention
rumors
of
going around,
Shador.
or that was a call from ownership that
Yeah, Jimmy Haslam was.
nobody in that room made the decision. They got the call and said, "You guys got to do it now," and that's why you saw everyone just kind of like frowning and
Yep.
golf clapping, just like
Yep.
got our guy.
Yeah, writing out the fantasy outlook for Shadur Sanders was
Yeah.
just rough for the rookie guide. I was just like, I don't know, man. He could be the starter by week 4. He could also just not make the team. Like it's
Yeah.
such and even if, and that's the other thing with Shador, and I don't want to like derail the show, but even if he does, he's not going to be in our rankings. Just
Yeah.
spoiler. Even if he does become the starter at some point, I don't know that it's going to be good enough for them to overlook having 2 first round draft choices next year and how bad this team's going to be. Like they are fully tanking for whatever next big name quarterback there is. All right, let's go into the next tier here. Tier number 4 for us, where at 11, Dave, we've got Luther Burden, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. And this one, ton of fun. Ton of fun. I would love the landing spot a lot more if Colston Loveland wasn't there. there was a genuine excitement on the face of Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles when they drafted Luther Burden. They seem to have a very distinct plan for a playmaker like this. They talked about wanting to use him out of the slot. Like there was a lot of the talk in the offseason. DJ Moore might play the slot, Roma Dunze might play the slot. And this is actually from Ben Johnson saying these guys have the ability to do it. And then Colson Loveland got drafted on night one, and I was like, ooh, he could be a fancy slot, you know? And then all of a sudden, here comes Luther Burden, where it's like this guy can only play the slot, but he is one of the better athletes on the field when he's there, and he's great in space. He's good after the catch. This almost seems like it's tailor made for Ben Johnson in this offense, where he might not be the wide receiver one on that team. But Dave, you mentioned like DJ Moore is not super happy. Roma Dunze is a very different archetype. Like there's a world where this receiving room
There's a
is
world,
Col-
as we love to
yeah,
say around draft season. There is a
there,
world.
there's a world where this receiving room ends up being Roma Dunze, Colston Loveland, and Luther Burden in the very, very near future, growing with Caleb Williams.
So, I'm definitely very plugged in to the Bears beat as being a Bears fan, of course. We talked about it a little bit last offseason, Alfredo, but we haven't dove super deep into it. But there was a lot of effort issues from DJ Moore last year. Literally walking off the field and sitting down on the bench before the whistle blew on one play, giving up on routes, not blocking the way he was supposed to. When he was the second or third target, he would not give his full effort on those routes. And Ben Johnson, right after they drafted Luther Burden, had a press conference where he said, not so thinly veiled message to DJ Moore saying, we expect our receivers to block. Even if you're the fourth option on that play, we want you running with 100% effort. And then I think them going out and drafting Colson Loveland and Luther Burden was a message sent to DJ Moore. Now, I haven't heard the comp. I haven't heard this specific comp for Luther Burden, but Alfredo, do you think it's out of line to say there's a little bit of Jamison Williams in Luther Burden's game? They were actually high school teammates. I don't know if you knew
I
that. They
was
played
just gonna
together
say,
in St.
yeah.
Louis. Similar attitudes as well. Like if you listen to both of these guys talk, but I think there's a little bit of Jamison Williams in Luther Burden's game where he can be that guy that they could send in motion and then just blow the top off the defense and use him in that sort of role. I think he's a little bit better after the catch and breaking tackles and running through traffic than
Yeah.
Jamison Williams is, but I don't know if looking at all of these playmakers right now with Cole Kmet there and DJ Moore there and all these other guys that we've been talking about, I don't know if we're going to see all of those guys on the week one roster. I think there could be some sort of imminent trade happening.
I mean that'd be really, really interesting. When I hear Ben Johnson say Luther Burden was at the top of our board, granted,
hmm
words can mean anything. It could mean he was in their top 20, in their top 30, and when he was there at what was it, 39, it was a shock to them, right? So it's got to be really exciting for them to get this player. A lot of the question is going to be: is there enough football to go around for DJ Moore, Colston Loveland, Roma Dunze, and honestly, everything that they did in this draft, the Bears, to me signals they just want to get the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands faster and sooner.
hmm
And to me, that hurts a guy like Roma Dunze, who's probably not as likely to be catching a lot of those short routes and the screen routes. And I like Rome a lot. I think he's a phenomenal prospect. I think he can be a really good player. Unless the DJ Moore thing happens, I think we're looking at something where we see Luther Burden getting 3 or 4 catches a game and a carry per game. Colston Loveland looking at another 3 or 4 catches a game. DJ Moore, and this thing starts to really get split out where everyone is good, but no one is great. And really, the biggest beneficiary becomes
Caleb Williams,
Caleb Williams. Right.
6,000-yard season coming. Let's go.
There it is. That's how you do it. You don't decide which pass catcher. You just take Caleb Williams.
I mean,
All
really
right.
though, like the only time we've ever seen something like this happen, where there are this many playmakers and they all are fantasy relevant, was like prime Peyton Manning in Denver. And I don't think Caleb Williams
Mm-hmm.
is at that level yet. So yeah, there's going to be some disappointing pass catchers here. Matt Harmon tweeted something the other day saying like there's going to be wars this offseason about who the Bears pass catcher is to draft. And I responded, and I think the
Just
answer
don't
is just
fight it.
draft Caleb Williams. That's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
One other
Yeah.
thing I'll
Don't
say,
don't,
sorry, I
don't fight
know
the war you can't win.
we're very long-winded on this show, but I'm excited. You're excited, Alfredo. There's a lot to talk about. I think the Bears were 100% dead set on taking Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, who went the 2 picks before they were on the clock. And I think that they panicked, and I don't think they made a wrong decision. But I think when those two running backs went off the board, they said, "Well, let's just go BPA and we'll figure it out later." And best player available was Luther Burden, who they said they had a high first round grade on. So I think they wanted one of the running backs. When it didn't work out, they pivoted to Luther Burden, and now they just have an embarrassment of riches, and they'll figure it out.
I don't know, man. When one of the best offensive minds in the NFL says they had a high first round grade on a player, I get excited for it.
Yeah,
I get really excited for it. And yeah, I'm letting my bias show. I loved Luther Burden before the draft. I'm still happy with where he ended up. At 12, Jaden Higgins, wide receiver for the Houston Texans. It's a good landing spot. I don't know that I see it as a great landing spot. This is where you and I have a big disparity. You have him at 9, I have him at 16. Before the show, I made my reasoning for the ranking pretty clear. He's always going to be second fiddle to Nico Collins. There's the Dalton Schultz of it all, the Christian Kirk of it all. Should those guys be issues long term? I don't think so. But also, does Tank Dell return to form? Probably not, unfortunately, just because of the nature of the injury. There's also the drafting of Jalen Knoll, Jaden Higgins' Iowa State teammate, who I actually liked better in the pre-draft process. So like, there's enough murkiness there where I want to be more excited about this player, this draft capital, this landing spot, where I say it's good, it's not great.
yeah, I feel that. I just see that the Houston Texans, I think they had a great draft. I mean, they did exactly what they needed to do in just aggressively attacking the offensive side of the ball to try to get CJ Stroud back on track. Because we saw it last year. Stephon Diggs went down with the injury. Nico Collins got hurt. Tank Dell got hurt. The offensive line was in shambles. And as a Houston fan, I can't imagine how scary it is to like see what we thought was going to be like a future Hall of Famer in CJ Stroud after his rookie season, and then see him completely just fall the way that he did going into year two. They're doing everything they can to get him back on track. And I love this. I mean, Jaden Higgins does a lot of the same things Nico Collins does. And you know, it's better than one Nico Collins, two Nico Collins. And now I think they have them. And I think that the falling of Jalen Knoll to them in round 3 is a better answer than what they got in free agency in Christian Kirk. So I could see CJ Stroud going back to the player we saw his rookie year, where we have to remember there was over a month of the season where he was supporting 2 top 10 wide receivers in Tank Dell and Nico Collins. And I think he could do the same now with Nico Collins and Jaden Higgins, give them both top 10 production, because there are 2 good weapons and the defense isn't going to be able to just hone in on one guy. I think, I could be wrong, but I think this gets CJ Stroud back on track and he could be that 5,000 yard passer again.
I mean, Jalen Knoll's going to have to do a hell of a job blocking if it gets CJ Stroud on back. I know they got Ursary, the offensive tackle out of Minnesota. I still have some concerns about the offensive line there in
Yes.
Houston, and I think rightfully so. I do like this. I think that the Jalen Knoll pick later on that the Houston Texans made is a lot like the Luther Burden pick that the Bears made, where they're like, we didn't expect this guy to be on the board, but screw it, let's do it. Let's bring him on. This guy just adds more firepower to the offense, and I think that's where when we see something like that, whether it's Colson Level and Jaden Higgins, their draft capital matters so much. But if we're going to say the same thing for a Quinshawn Judkins, where it's like, I don't like they drafted another person that does what you do just a few rounds later, that's where I start to get worried with some of these guys. It's like, okay, you got one more person that could potentially take work. So that's where we just remain a little bit split on Jaden Higgins, but I still think he deserves to be in this tier. I think he is. I don't know if I put him in the first round of Dynasty rookie drafts, but I think I put him on that turn where he should be early second round.
He was a big riser for me. I love Jaden Higgins early in the process. And then as we got deeper into it, I started falling for Jalen Knoll and Trey Harris and some other guys that I moved up there. But foolishly ended up having to move Jaden Higgins down to make room for those other guys. But when I saw that landing spot and I saw, you look at that draft capital going second overall in the second round, that is pretty serious investment in the wide
Yeah.
receiver position. I was very happy to be able to move Jaden Higgins back up in my rankings.
All right, 13 and 14, RJ Harvey and Caleb Johnson, the next tier of running backs, so to speak. And Dave, we both have RJ Harvey at 13. However, we are split on Caleb Johnson. I've got him at 12. You've got him at 17. So it puts these guys in the same tier, the same range. We both really liked RJ Harvey prior to the draft. We both had him as running back 6. We both had Caleb Johnson at running back 5. and the landing spots have shifted things a little bit for you. I'm sticking with the same thing where Caleb Johnson is just slightly ahead of RJ Harvey. I am not ready to trust Sean Payton. We talk about coaches that love to have these committee backfields. I don't think it's fair for us to look at the Alvin Kamara usage and think that that's what's going to happen here with an RJ Harvey. He doesn't quite have the same receiving profile as an Alvin Kamara. It's not the same thing when, having Drew Brees under center, even though Bo Nix did like to check it down plenty. Bo Nix also runs the ball a hell of a lot more than Drew Brees ever did. He runs the ball a lot in the goal line specifically. Jaleel McLaughlin is also a pass catching back on this team. So there's like enough things there where it worries me. I know I'm sounding more negative. We have him ranked the exact
I know,
same.
it's just funny. Like,
Um,
that's the way you've talked about. You've had this kind of negative connotation to RJ Harvey. I've been like to the moon, and then I thought it was really funny when I saw both of our rankings, and I'm like, wait, we actually agree completely on
it's
RJ Harvey.
It's because I'm trying to avoid the thing where I'm seeing people go RJ Harvey to the moon. He's my new
Top
running
five
back
pick, top
3,
seven
top 5
pick.
pick, top 7.
Yeah.
Like I can't be there. I can't be there, especially with a Sean Payton running back, especially with Bo Nix at quarterback, who is actually one of the sneaky better rushing quarterbacks in the league and is taking goal line touches from a guy like this. Now, RJ Harvey was good at the goal line stuff, but
Mhm.
I'm curious to see what happens here with the Denver Broncos. I like the draft capital for Harvey, and that's why I've got him at 13. Caleb Johnson, though, is the guy I really want us to talk about because we're so different on this. I think there could not be a better landing spot for Caleb Johnson. This is the exact type of offense that he thrives in. This is, I mean, this to me, this is the same equivalent of being a second round pick because this is the Steelers' second pick that they had. They traded their second round pick for DK Metcalf, and with their second selection of the draft, they took Caleb Johnson, a guy who they've been really, really excited about. Arthur Smith has actually been on record saying, we know that Caleb Johnson is a guy who gets better as the game goes on with more volume. And that's been something that we've been worried about in the past. But we also saw last year, like Jalen Warren is capped at how many touches he's going to get. So I see Caleb Johnson sliding right into where Najee Harris was last year, but I think he might be better. And this offense could be better once Aaron Rodgers signs, who we saw last year. Aaron Rodgers is now check down king. There's enough there that makes me give the edge to Caleb Johnson at 12 and then RJ Harvey at 13. But Dave, talk to us about why you have Caleb Johnson just a little bit lower than RJ Harvey.
Yeah, I mean, kind of for all the reasons you just said, they're going to drop him into the Najee Harris role, and Najee Harris has been in RB3 in that role. So I think he's going to get a lot of the early down work, but he's going to cede a lot of the high value touches in the passing game to Jalen Warren. So I think when you draft Caleb Johnson, you're hoping that he could take those 12 and 15-yard runs that Najee Harris had and turn them into 70-yard touchdowns. And if he's able to do that, like break out of the secondary that Najee Harris couldn't, I see the appeal and I see the upside. But I still just worry that this is going to be very similar to what everything I just said about Caleb or about Quinshon Judkins. I fear that he's going to be the early down guy on a bad offense, and that even if the workload is there, the efficiency, the touchdowns, and the passing down work won't be, and that would just cap his upside and kind of keep him in that low end RB2, high end RB3 range, which there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's a serviceable spot on your dynasty rosters for a player of that caliber, but I'd prefer taking him, a little bit later in the second round than using an early second round pick on him.
Najee Harris, running back 2, each of the last 2 years. He's been a top 24 running back in both those last 2 years. That's kind of where I see Caleb Johnson fitting in as a guy who maybe doesn't have that upside of being a top 12 guy, but being in that top 24, which is the same thing that I see for RJ Harvey. Like, I don't see this top 12 fantasy running back thing for RJ Harvey. Like, it would have to be just a big improvement on his skill set. Who I sound once again, I sound negative. I actually really like RJ Harvey. I think he's got
I'm
some
just
things
asking,
that
are
he's
you
got to
looking at
get better at.
overall points? Because we know Najee Harris never misses games, but on a per game basis, I'm seeing RB26 last year, RB29 the year before. So the overall
Yeah,
production has been there because he always plays 17 games, but the per game does push him a little bit outside of that RB2 range.
Sure, and then there's guys in the per game where it's like they played 6 games, so their
Right.
average is really high, right? So like the J.K. Dobbins, for example, in 2023 was a top 30 running back. He played 1 game in points per game. So
Fair.
like there's little things like that we'd probably have to go filter through all of it. What I'm getting at here is, besides the semantics of it, is like Najee Harris. We've talked about how he hasn't been bad for fantasy, and the role has been decent. Caleb Johnson, I think, ends up being, I think both these guys, Caleb Johnson and RJ Harvey, end up being draft values. And I kind of want to just take whichever one falls further in the draft. I'm not trying to reach for either of these guys with a top 10 dynasty rookie pick, whereas I think a lot of people are steaming up RJ Harvey. And that's where I kind of, maybe that's where my ranking comes from, is just trying to push that down a little bit more, where I'm saying I'm not buying into that much hype.
Last guy in this tier. I think this is going to
Yep.
surprise a lot of people. They're like, how are you guys an hour into the show and you haven't talked about one of the first round receivers yet?
Matthew Golden.
Yeah.
Number 15 on here. And Dave, you've got him at 15. I've got him at 14. Neither of us were very high on Matthew Golden. I believe he was our wide receiver 5 going into the NFL draft.
Wide receiver 7 for me. I was even
yeah,
low. I had to tick
I
him up a
think,
little
yeah,
bit, but still don't feel great about it.
yeah, I think he was 6 for me. What, 1, 2, 3. Let's see, 4, 5. I had Golden at 5. So him being our wide receiver 6 in the rankings, it makes sense. And you and I were talking before the show, is like, I don't know that Golden is better than Jaden Reed.
Yeah.
Heck, I don't know that he's better than Romeo Dobbs. And I know there's going to be people that say, did you not watch those big games? Yeah, we saw them. Where was it the rest of the career? Golden's going to have to do a lot of developing. Meanwhile, that's kind of what this entire wide receiver room is guys that are good at certain things, but not great at everything. And a lot of people have attributed Matthew Golden's speed in the 40 to being this just incredible deep threat. He didn't do that a lot at Texas. It was actually one of the routes that he ran the least. Where he's going to win is doing a lot of those outbreaking routes,
The Jaden Reed routes.
Route. Yeah, like that's where he wins a lot in the intermediate game. And Matthew Golden is one of these guys I thought got steamed up in the NFL draft. The Packers, almost to an extent, seemed like they were doing this for the PR win, where
100%. We're in front of the home crowd, and we haven't drafted a receiver in 30 whatever years.
Yeah,
Here
Mark Murphy's out there like mic drop and does the like finger guns at the crowd. There you go. We got you a wide receiver. Suck it, Aaron Rodgers. Like, that's how it felt to me. It almost felt like they just kind of got sucked up in the ether of the NFL draft. And I think Golden's fine. I don't see him as a guy that you need to be reaching for in round 1 of your rookie drafts. I like these running backs better than him. I like the other wide receivers we've talked about better than him. So yeah, that's why 15 for me, I think, is just fine. If he's there at the beginning of the second round of your draft, sure, take a shot on him.
Yeah, and unfortunately that means that you and I will probably have no shares of Matthew Golden, because in the drafts that I've seen, there's always somebody reaching for him at 107, 108, and that guy will not be me.
Yeah, we're actually in a rookie draft right now, Dave, where Matthew Golden went at the 201. I don't think that's a bad spot to take him. RJ Harvey went before him. Luther Burden went before him. So it's about right. I was much happier at the 204 taking Jack Besh, who kicks off our next tier here, tier 5. And let's do this, Dave. Let's just list all of these players and talk about
this
some
is going to
of
be
our
an
favorites.
8-hour show.
Yeah, because we can't.
we got meetings this afternoon.
Yeah, got things to do, man. Might go to Home Depot. I don't know. I don't know if there'll be enough time. Please tell me you know where that's from.
I don't. I'm sorry.
Old school. Go watch.
Very uncultured. I apologize.
Oh, there you go, Dave. Looks like you and I are gonna have a trade on our hands, because in that rookie draft I was just talking about,
yeah,
at the 207,
yeah,
at the 207, Kyle Williams came off the board.
And I want to trade up to 208 to get my boy Trey Harris, because I don't know if he's going to make it down to 210. So we'll discuss after the show what I got to sweeten this deal to move up 2 spots here. Maybe Taysom Hill.
That's not happening.
All right, let's get back to Jack Besh.
Yep. Back in here. So
drafts.
let's list the tier here. So at 17, Jack Besh, wide receiver for the Raiders. At wait, I said that wrong. At 16, it's Jack Besh. At 17, it's Jackson Dart, quarterback for the Giants. 18, Mason Taylor, tight end for the Jets. 19, Terrence Ferguson, tight end for the Rams. At 20, Trey Harris, wide receiver for the Chargers. 21, Kyle Williams, wide receiver for the Patriots. 22, Tyler Shuck, quarterback for the Saints. 23, Elijah Arroyo, tight end for the Seahawks. At 24, Cam Skattebo, Running back for the Giants, 25, Jalen Milroe. Quarterback for the Seahawks, and a 26, Bashal Tutin, running back for the Jaguars. Dave, let's do this. Let's each pick two players out of this tier that we really want to talk about. And I'm going to start us off with Jack Besh because I love the landing spot for Jack Besh in a wide open wide receiver room where he can play outside or he can play inside in the slot. We've seen that Geno Smith has no problem with intermediate to deep throws, 15, 20 yards downfield. And that's actually where Jack Besh thrived the most. He's not a deep threat, and he's not this slot wide receiver that many people have made him out to be. He actually played outside quite a bit. Now his best role might be in the slot. Jacoby Myers playing outside, and he's good. Jacoby Myers isn't your traditional, wide receiver one on a team. I think that we're looking at a role where Jack Besh could actually do something very similar to what Ladd McConkey did as a rookie last year, where Jack Besh is coming down with 80 catches in his rookie year. Geno Smith is good enough to support something like that. He can support 4 or 5 touchdowns on the season. It probably won't be amazing in the rookie year, but the list of rookie receivers that are able to do that and get 80 catches in a season and then go on to keep being productive, there's not many guys who go and do that in their rookie season and then just fall off a cliff. So I know this is going to be a run first team. I don't think Jack Besh is going to command a lot of the best defenders on opposing teams. I love the potential for target volume here for a player that I just loved pre-draft.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers isn't the one that worries me. I could easily see Jack Besh jumping ahead of Jacoby Myers on the depth chart.
It's
It's
Brock
Brock
Bowers.
Bowers and Ashton Jinty. Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, Brock Bowers is
Sure.
going to be pulling 160 targets for himself. Ashton Jinty's going to be getting a lot, and I think that Jack Besh as the third option on the team could still be very valuable. I like him as a player a lot, and was really happy that he got that draft capital. This was a guy a lot of
Do
people
you
were saying
do you
should fall to
worry?
day 3. I was thrilled when he went early in round 2.
Do you worry even the slightest bit that with a new offensive coordinator, new head coach, new quarterback, and now added weapons, the Brock Bowers target share goes down a little bit because it's something that's just so different? I know he's incredibly talented. This is not a negative against Brock Bowers, but
Target
that the targets
share,
change.
target
The
share
target,
Yeah,
that
that
the
might go down a
overall
little bit, but I
targets.
think with Geno, we're just gonna see more overall volume, and that's gonna
Okay.
offset any dip that we see in target share.
Okay. Go ahead. Give us your guy out of this tier.
Oh, it's obviously gonna be Trey Harris. I mean, I was thrilled with this landing spot here with the Los Angeles Chargers. I am a little bit higher on him than you. I've got him pegged
See,
as my 203 in rookie draft, so I'm okay taking him early in the second round. I just see him as such a good complementary piece to Ladd McConkey. I'll say a lot of the things that I said, my kind of immediate reaction when he was drafted, but Ladd McConkey is going to be that X receiver that can run every single route in the book, which makes Trey Harris's job a little bit easier. Like right now, I think there's a huge question mark. Is Trey Harris limited in his abilities, or was Trey Harris limited by the Ole Miss Lane Kiffin offense that he ran last year, where 92% of his routes were 2 routes? And I don't think we really have an answer right now, but I think either way, if that's all he can do right now, we can see kind of Rashi Rice, Amon St. Brown, rookie season type of workloads where he's just running these handful of routes he does well. They get him the ball. Well, the defense puts their focus on Ladd McConkey. And if we're wrong and he can run much more than he was asked to do at Ole Miss, then we're just looking at a sky high ceiling where there's 2 very good, versatile weapons here in Los Angeles. So I see the path to immediate production, but I also see a path to long term production if he's able to develop, or if we were wrong on our scouting reports on him. I love this landing spot. I love what the Chargers are doing. They've got a great offensive line. They've got a very good run game now. They've got a good quarterback. They've already got their number 1 wide receiver. Trey Harris is going to fit right in and can easily, immediately become that number 2 option on this team.
yeah, I hate to be a party pooper, but I've got poop, and we've seen this movie before, like for Trey Harris. That's where my thing is. Like I've been the Trey Harris hater on this show, and that's I'll just continue being in that role. Like I actually audibly laughed when he went to the Chargers because I was like, we've got Quentin Johnston at home, and it's just like here we go with another Quentin Johnston. And it's just like I feel like we've seen this, and the Chargers, they also have Mike Williams. You've got Quentin Johnston. Now you've got Trey Harris. It's like, how many guys are you going to have that do the same thing and kind of hope that one of them works out? Um, I, I don't hate it to the point where I'm just like, he's off my draft board, but he has to fall to where I have him ranked, probably around like 24, 25 at the end of the second round, where I'm doing it. There's guys that I get it. He's talented at certain things. I just prefer some other players over him.
So Matt Waldman and
Um,
I, we did, and I kind of wish we had recorded it because it was a fun show. We did like a call that we did like an hour and a half a
yeah.
couple of weeks ago where we were looking, and he was able to. What Matt did is he gathered all of the plays where Trey Harris was pulling press coverage, and what we did was look through his first few years in college, he couldn't get off the line against press coverage. He was trying to use his physicality and he couldn't do it. But we saw a huge improvement last year in 2024, where he started playing with a little bit more hesitation. He added some new moves to his release as well. So I think that's the promising sign for me is that if you look at Trey Harris's 5 year collegiate career as a whole, it doesn't look great, but there were serious improvements that he made in 2024. But then his season was cut short by injury. We didn't see it over a full season. But if you look just at last year rather than 2023 and 2022 tape, he looked like a much more well rounded receiver.
Yeah, my problem with receivers is always if you're a bad route runner, you don't learn how to run routes better when you get to the NFL. Like they don't have time to teach you how to run routes better. So you kind of have to rely on that guy putting in extra time and extra effort. I don't know Trey Harris. He might be one of the hardest workers in the NFL and could just get better and better every single year. That could happen. We just more often than not see it not happen. And like that's where I get nervous with guys like this. Um, who else from this tier you want to talk about, Dave? Because I got a few guys that I think are interesting, but I want to see if there's anyone else that sticks out to you in this one.
Jackson Dart, I'm way
Okay.
higher on him than I wanted to be.
Yeah,
And this is one
I'm
that
not.
I have come around to because I mean, I suck at evaluating quarterbacks. Everybody sucks at evaluating quarterbacks. I think the only people like nobody's good at this. Like everybody thinks that they're good at evaluating quarterbacks. I didn't like what I saw from Jackson Dart. I saw very poor accuracy. I saw poor decision making. I saw, you know, balls thrown to wide open receivers that were just put in the dirt. He was a very frustrating player to watch, but I'm totally okay saying that I could be wrong on this. And I think that the Giants did the right thing here because if the plan, the long term plan was Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, they didn't have a plan. And Dable is clearly on the hot seat right now. You got to remember, he inherited Daniel Jones. He didn't want to extend Daniel Jones. The Mariners decided they were going to extend Daniel Jones. Last year, he desperately wanted to trade up in the draft to get Jaden Daniels and was unable to make that happen. Now he finally has his quarterback. And I think a lot of the concerns with Jackson Dart are the same concerns people had about Josh Allen when he was coming into the league. Some of the scattershot tendencies, some of the head scratching decision making. Of course, Josh Allen is a much bigger and more physical, a better athlete. He does possess some things that Jackson Dart doesn't have. But we saw Dable able to coach some of those not so great tendencies out of Josh Allen. I don't want to say that I have blind faith that he's going to turn Jackson Dart into the next Josh Allen. That's not what I'm saying at all. But the Giants took a shot on a quarterback. Brian Dable does have a history of developing quarterbacks. So I'm willing to say that I could have been wrong on my pre draft analysis. You know, them trading up to move into the first round to get Jackson Dart. I'm not going to ignore that. I think that Jackson Dart could struggle, especially if they put him out on the field a little bit too early. But 2, 3 years from now, who knows what Dart could be? I think that he's worth a risk in the middle of the second round of your drafts.
Dave, you were very eloquent in how too many people think they know how to evaluate quarterbacks, and we need to be willing to be wrong. And as well as you said that, I'm going to stick to my guns and be ignorant here because Jackson Dart was my quarterback 5. And I'm not going to sit here and say I know how to evaluate quarterbacks better than anyone else. And I don't. I don't. Jackson Dart was my quarterback 5. I don't think the Giants had a real plan at quarterback because if your plan is to get Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, and then trade up into the first round to get a quarterback at 25 and do what you did, I don't think you really had a plan. I think you had to hope that everything went your way and you're just kind of scrambling. And that's the thing is like you mentioned Brian Dable having this history of developing quarterbacks.
Quarterback,
Well,
one quarterback.
yeah, I was like, that's the thing is he's
Yeah.
got a history of developing Josh Allen, right? And I think that we do make this mistake. Not that you're making a mistake, but I think we see it happen a lot where coaches get credit for things that players do, and we say like this guy developed XYZ player. And I don't know that it always works out that way. I'm worried about Jackson Dart because I think I don't think we're going to get enough time with him on the field. I think in a best case scenario, Jackson Dart plays 10 games
Yeah,
and then and
maybe
how good
probably
is
less
the
than that.
team?
Probably less
Yeah,
than that.
like
I mean,
eight
I
eight
think
games,
drafting
6
Jackson
games.
Dart, you're hoping for 2026. I think any production that you get in 2025 is a cherry on top, but I think drafting Jackson Dart, you're hoping that you're getting a guy that's going to play 2026, 27, 28, 29.
And that's the problem, though, is I don't think that Joe Shane and Brian Dayball make it to that year if Jackson Dart ends up being the quarterback of the future. You've got an owner who is frustrated after the loss of Saquon Barkley, an owner who's frustrated that they don't have a quarterback, a team that uh, got used to winning Super Bowls and having elite quarterback. Oh, good, very. I'm not going to get into that, but having Eli Manning at quarterback, um, I think there's going to be frustration. I think that the leash is getting shorter for Joe Shane and Brian Dayball. I wasn't a Jackson Dart fan before the draft. This pushed him into my second round of rookie drafts, but I'm not quite there where I'm willing to look at that 1-2 turn where I want to take him. In fact, I kind of still like some of these other quarterbacks. Tyler Shuck, I have 2 spots ahead, who he's become kind of the meme of the draft of like, really? The Saints took him over Shador Sanders, and people would play that video of him at the combine. But the film's actually quite good. We want to talk about traits and like guys that just have these incredible traits and strong arm and ability to extend plays. Shuck is right there with for me with Dart, where he's got all the same abilities. I just saw some better tape with him and a more well versed offense. And the guy who excites me, who we haven't talked about at all here, is Jalen Milroe. We talked
Oh,
about him
oh
on
yeah.
draft night, where the Seahawks, they did this before. You sign Matt Flynn to a big deal, you draft Russell Wilson, and here comes Russell Wilson to be the starter. Jalen Milroe is going to take a lot more developing and a lot more time, but Jeff Bell pointed out, the head coach of the Seahawks, Mike McDonald, he worked with Lamar Jackson in
Hmm.
Baltimore. He is no stranger to mobile quarterbacks that have a special skill set. And when the Seahawks were asked about Jalen Milroe, they said he's a quarterback through and through. We're not doing a Taysom Hill thing with him.
Right.
He's not going to be just a wildcat quarterback guy. It's like if he goes into the game, it is to play quarterback. And Jalen Milroe's just a guy that's been easy to root for too. Like he's talked about how he has so many things to clean up and get better at. And I love a self-aware player. I love a self-aware player who's willing to learn and get better. And he's a guy that I'm absolutely willing to take a shot on in second rounds of my Dynasty Superflex drafts because I think the upside is there for a top 5, top 6 fantasy quarterback in any given season because of the rushing ability.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the one thing too to take into consideration with Jalen Milroe is that in your redraft leagues, if you're playing late round quarterback, there's some fear with Sam Darnold there. Not that I think he gets pushed out of a job in the summer camp. I mean, it's possible. We've seen it happen before. But I think the big fear here would be that if Sam Darnold isn't playing the MVP level football he was playing last year, Seahawks are out of playoff contention. All of a sudden, it's week 15, and they say, let's see what we got in Jalen Milroe. And then all of a sudden, you're scrambling looking for a streaming quarterback. That is very much so in the range of outcomes, is that Sam Darnold isn't on this big $100 million contract like the headlines made it sound. The reality is they could move on from him pretty easily if things aren't working out. And we might see it late in the season where they say, let's see what we've got with Milroe and Darnold, a guy that you may have drafted in redraft or traded for in Dynasty, might be out of a job when those games matter most.
That Seahawks offense can actually be so fun. Jalen Milroe, Jackson
Elijah
Smith-Njigba,
Arroyo.
Elijah Arroyo, and then honestly, it feels like they're kind of recreating the Ravens where they've got this stable of running backs. You've got a Ken Walker who's basically a J.K. Dobbins. You get a Jalen Milroe in there who's a developmental Lamar Jackson. You've got an Elijah Arroyo who can be sort of a Mark Andrews role out there as this receiving tight end. Like there's a lot of fun things they could do on that team.
And is it
Seahawks had
crazy to
themselves a
think
great draft.
I know he was a fifth round pick, slid for medical concerns, but it wouldn't shock me
Torrey
if
Horton.
Torrey Horton beats out
Yeah.
MVS in camp and he becomes a starting wide receiver here. And
Yeah.
I mean, those are just guys that I love. If they roll out there,
Yeah.
the 3 wide receiver sets, if it's Cooper Kupp, Jackson Smith, Najigba, and Torrey Horton, it's going to make the job easy for whoever the quarterback is.
It hasn't always been popular because the Seahawks draft guys that a lot of people go, who?
Mhm.
But the Seahawks have been really good at drafting throughout the years. Like John Schneider's still there. There's not many GMs that last 10 plus years in the league,
They had my
and
favorite
he
draft.
has.
I was
Yeah.
on a show
I
yesterday, asked who my favorite draft was. Seahawks absolutely smoked it. Caught a
yeah.
slipping Nick Emenwari in round 2 as well. They had themselves a really, really good draft.
All right, let's go to the final tier here where we're each going to pick one player. I'm going to list them all out. At 27, Jalen Knoll. 28, Woody Marks. 29, Harold Fannin. At 30, Jarquez Hunter. 31, Jordan James. 32, Ty Felton. 33, Jaden Blue. 34, Trevor Etienne. 35, Isaac Tesla. And at 36, Dylan Sampson. Dave, who is the player that sticks out to you from this final tier?
Jalen Noel would be the best in the tier, and we've got him atop the tier. I'd
It's
argue that he
true.
probably belongs in the tier above, but I'm not going to talk about him because we have probably bored you talking about Jalen Noel all off season. Jarquez Hunter is a guy that I haven't really mentioned on this show at all, but I like the landing spot, and especially in Dynasty. I think that he's a player that you should spend your fourth round pick on, even if it means that you're putting him on a taxi squad in year one. I look at Sean McVay's tendencies since he's been a head coach, and a lot of people see Sean McVay with Todd Gurley early on, but we got to remember he didn't draft Todd Gurley. He inherited Todd Gurley from the Jeff Fisher era. Since then, it's been a lot of day three picks that he has thrown at running backs, and he has found productive running backs late in drafts. Kyron Williams is on the last year of his career, and we know they drafted Blake Corum last year. They drafted Jarquez Hunter this year. All three of those guys are very much so cut from the same cloth. They're similar types of players. So I think what they're hoping to do here is not put a lot of money into the running back position. Sean McVay is one of those millennial head coaches. You know, he trusts the data and he knows that running backs don't matter. I think he knows that giving Kyron Williams $50 million dollars would likely be a mistake. So as Kyron Williams gets to the end of his rookie deal, I could see them trying to position themselves for life after Kyron Williams. And that could make Jarquez Hunter a potential guy in 2026 that could end up on a big role in a good offense.
Yeah, I think once you get to this tier, all the guys you need to be looking at are running backs. And you
100%.
mentioned Jarquez Hunter. I
Woody
think Woody
Marks is
Marks is
another
a
one.
guy
Yep.
who you can look at here as being the pass catching back in Houston.
Also
I
a
think
great pass
Jaden
blocker.
Blue.
We talked about the bad
Mhm.
offensive line. Woody Marks is going to help out there. So that pass blocking ability is going to get him snaps as a rookie, most likely.
Jaden Blue becomes really
Hmm.
interesting as an explosive running back with big time speed for a running back room that doesn't have a lot of speed over there in Dallas. I was a big Trevor Etienne guy, and I felt pretty vindicated when he went earlier in the draft there in round 4. But I just hate the landing spot. You've got Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, Jonathan Brooks. Like it's just gross. The guy I do want to mention here though is Jordan James, and he was one of those running backs I was a bit higher on than a lot of people at Football Guys. Jeff Bell was another guy who was high on him as well. And what I love about Jordan James, he reminded me so much of a Kyron Williams, of a Bucky Irving, but I think he's a bit more stout than a Bucky Irving. He runs through contact. He is a no nonsense runner. He doesn't dance behind the line of scrimmage, and he's one of those one cut and go guys. And we've seen that last year. Bucky Irving was incredibly successful in Liam Cohen's offense. Liam Cohen been part of the Sean McVay offense. The Sean
Hmm.
McVay offense comes from this Shanahan wide zone run scheme, and that's the thing. That's what we're going to see Jordan James excel in. A guy who's already been good at this. He's a one cut and go runner who. He's not going to be the same home run hitter that maybe an Isaac Garindo was last year, who ran a ridiculous 40, but he's going to be the guy that's consistently getting them 6, 7, 8 yards per play, and that's something that we know that Kyle Shanahan values. And listen, Christian McCaffrey, we don't know what the future holds there. We don't know if he's going to be medically just the same guy. And I think there's very much a realistic approach here where the 49ers move to a role where they're saying, you know what? If Christian McCaffrey's hurt, we just got to go to a committee backfield here where we're using Isaac Garindo and Jordan James, and let's have a thunder and lightning on our hands. And let's just keep using these guys because we've seen whoever hops into that running back role with the Niners ends up having success. I liked Jordan James before the draft. I like the landing spot here, even though it is a crowded room. I think he's a perfectly good third round flyer for me in rookie drafts.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest takeaway here. Third, fourth, if you're in a fifth round rookie draft, just get running backs. Those are the lotto tickets that could end up spiking in value. Yeah, we've had Puka Nakua and Amon St. Brown. There have been guys who have gone late in rookie drafts at other positions that have panned out. Brock Purdy comes to mind as well. But the hit rate for running backs is going to be much, much, much higher. And the last piece of just
They
kind
may not
of
retain value as long, but
that's the
it's
other thing. Yeah.
you get that hit rate where they're going to be good for your
Then you
team
flip
for a
them
few games,
immediately.
and maybe you flip them, maybe you just ride it till the wheels come off, right? But like that's basically all you're getting out of third round rookie picks is just guys who maybe give you a good couple of games. The all-star hit rate is extremely low.
And I think like the perfect thing you want to do with these picks is spend a fourth round pick on a two guys that pop to mind immediately because we've talked about them from the last couple of years, Zamir White
Mhm.
and Ty Chandler. And what did you get from them? You got about 4 weeks of good production, but you spent fourth and fifth round picks on these guys, might have even picked them up off of waivers. And then after that breakout, people were flipping them for second round rookie picks.
Yep.
So that's just found money right there. Like you are able to get these guys that we know probably aren't going to have prolonged success, but then you could trade them for a second round rookie pick where you can get a guy who actually does have value. But this is also the time of year where we are blindly optimistic. Everybody's got the best case scenario. Everyone's climbing the
Yep.
depth chart. The reality is, even at the top of your rookie drafts, there are going to be big misses. If you're one of those guys that's in 50, 100 dynasty leagues and you want to play the market and you want exposure to players, do what you got to do. But if you're just in a handful of dynasty leagues, get the players you want, because the reality is, just because consensus rankings have a guy at, 108 and you're picking at 104 and you don't want to reach, who cares? If the guy you want is a few spots back, just pick him. These rookies, we think we have all the answers right now, but the reality is that there's a lot of misses in these rookie drafts. So get the guy you want, get the guy that you want on your team, and just have fun with it.
We're going to be back later on this week with special guests from Fantasy Points, Theo Greminger and Scott Barrett. And we're going to be discussing some of the biggest winners and losers in Dynasty, guys that you should be trading for or trading away. So make sure you're subscribed so you can check that out. And as always, Dave and I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. From each of us, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Adios.